Hey, what's going on, guys? This is SideQuest64, and coming back from a 4-day weekend, I've had a lot to think about. Growing up in the early 2000s, I'm a 1995 baby, so I didn't live the 90s, but I definitely lived the 2000s. I had an uncle who passed away at a very early age, and he was on a successful path to becoming a firefighter. Well, this uncle, I used to watch him play Metal Gear Solid 1, and that's my earliest memory of Metal Gear Solid in general. I had this friend one time when I was in fourth grade who had invited me over to his house, and I would usually take the bus to and from school, and on this day, I ended up just walking with him from school to his house, and he lived like down the street, and that was all fun and good. And I stayed there for about 3 hours. I stayed there till maybe 6 o'clock in the evening. And mind you, I was in fourth grade, maybe third grade. I want to say fourth, but yeah, let's just go with fourth grade. So, I knew that at some point when I decided to leave, that I was gonna have to walk home. And I didn't know how to get home. I just knew that if I walked in this direction, at some point, I'm gonna have to come across what was my neighborhood, right? So I left and I started walking and walking, and it was maybe like a good 40-minute walk. And I get home, and it's maybe 7 already. And my mom's like, where have you been? I've called the school, I called the cops. The school doesn't know where you're at, the cops don't know where you're at, I don't know where you were at. Where were you? I mean, trust me, my mom was pissed. And I just told her, I was like, oh, I was at my friend's house playing video games. We were playing this game called Metal Gear Solid 3. Snake Eater. Hideo Kojima Productions. Um, and yeah, my mom was really upset the next day when I was at school. I had to go into the office with the principal and the sheriff and explain why I had missed the bus yesterday and caused such a commotion. And everybody was worried. It wasn't necessarily that they were mad. I mean, at the time as a kid, like you feel like everybody's mad at you. You're in trouble. You're like, oh, dude, fucking, why is everybody beating me on the neck, right? But now that I'm older, and yeah, I have a little bit of an understanding. It was just worrying. They were upset. So, anyways, let's fast forward to maybe 2007, 2008. It's the last day of seventh grade, right? So I'm at a different school. I'm coming out of middle school. I'm going into eighth grade, right? So it's the last day of school. Summer's about to start. Summer starts the next day, summer vacation. And I decide to make the same mistake. Well, I knew I had experience making this mistake. I just didn't learn anything from it. But I guess in what I was about to do was different because I was a little bit older and I lived down the street from the school. So I actually didn't have to take a bus. You could take a bus, like technically you could, but I just didn't because I would walk. Sometimes I did, like if it was really cold, I would just take the bus, right? So, I mean, dude, it was like what, June, or excuse me, end of May, June. So I was like, yeah, it's fine. I'll walk. I'll walk home. So I ended up walking, and every now and then when I would be walking, like previously in the year, there was always a group of girls. And there's these two girls. One of them lived across the street on the corner house from me. Her name was Tanya, and I was a little more familiar with her. And the other two girls that she was with, one of them was Penelope, and the other one I don't remember her name. I really didn't talk to her too much. But growing up in Texas, where I grew up, there's a lot of people that don't speak English. And my Spanish wasn't the greatest, but it was enough to kind of, communicate things and get my message across. And so I walked with this group of girls and I talked to Penelope for the most part. What kind of music do you like? I was like this emo kid, and I kind of had like a history at the school from getting my ass beat, but also beating other kids' ass. So I used to get jumped a lot. I used to get beat up because I was a emo kid. I had the hair, I had the jeans. I used to wear girl jackets, whatever. Make of it what you will. I was an emo kid, right? And a lot of the guys didn't like that. A lot of the guys used to kick my ass. And specifically, like a group of like four boys would consistently and constantly make it, their job, their duty of the day to make my life a living hell. But the one thing I never understood is that, and to be fair, I was kind of like the only emo kid. But the one thing that I never understood was that there was a lot of emo girls. Like it was just, there was just emo scene chicks everywhere. And Penelope was one of them. Tanya, I guess you could kind of say was one of them as well. But I never understood why the guys would always get their ass kicked, or it was always tough for them. But the girls, it was like, oh, dude, they're hot, and they're just chicks. I guess I don't know. So yeah, so I'm talking to Penelope. I'm like, hey, what kind of music do you like? Have you heard of this band? Movies, films, and this is all in Spanish. So I'm like, ¿cuál música a ti te gusta? What kind of music do you like? And so we kind of had similar taste in music. Not really. I was a little more into like the hardcore emo, like Seosin and Chiodos and Circa Survive. She was more into like My Chemical Romance and what's another one? I don't know. I don't know a lot of them. A lot of like also Spanish rock, which I at the time I was like, yeah, Spanish rock is weak. I don't like it. Whatever. It's cool. But I enjoy talking to these girls. So we we get to a point where we either have to walk like on a downtrodden path or cut through the desert. And so I told him, I said, hey, trust me, let's cut through this desert. And my backyard was basically the desert. So, like, if you cut through the desert, at some point you're going to get to my backyard. And I said, we'll just jump the fence. We'll jump the fence from the desert over into my backyard. And from my backyard, you guys can go out to the street. It was going to save us at least like 10, 15 minutes, right? So they were like, okay, so it's like a billion degrees outside, right? Because it's June and it's super hot and it's in the middle of a desert. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's in the middle of a desert, and we get to my fence, like the backyard fence, and I just tell the girls like, "Yeah, let's jump it." And they couldn't jump it. I don't know. I mean, it's not. I just as a guy, as a kid, you kind of grow up with different skills. So they didn't. I don't think they were weak. I think it was just they were scared because there's like spider webs and lumber and all sorts of things, right? Just you didn't really want to get close to. And so I had to help them up. And I did kind of feel like a badass. I was like, yeah, dude, I help these chicks over. But I invited them in, which was weird because my grandparents weren't akin to visitors, especially visitors that they didn't know, and especially girls. That was kind of like a big no no with my grandparents. They were very cautious with, who was hanging out with who, and so they got some water, whatever, and they took off. But I walked them to Tanya's house, and I kind of wanted to keep hanging out with them. I'd never really talked to them up until that day, and I said, hey, why don't you guys come back and we'll hang out. And mostly it was like I kind of wanted them to like watch me play Metal Gear Solid 3, and they did. They came back. We were in the garage. I used to have a TV set up in the garage and I had the PlayStation set up in there. And, we drank a couple of sodas and they watched me play Metal Gear for like an hour. And then they were like, hey, let's go outside and play for a bit. And we did. We played for, up until like maybe like 8 o'clock. And I, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it is one of the memories I have that's tied to Metal Gear Solid 3. Because after playing outside all day and being in the sun, I went back into the garage and I jumped back on the PlayStation and I finished Metal Gear Solid 3. And I remember getting through Groznygrad, the second time when you have all of your equipment taken from you. And I remember thinking every time that I play through Metal Gear Solid 3 and I get to that point of the game, I always think, of this group of girls. And then also too, I think because of Tatiana and right Eva in Metal Gear Solid 3, I was like, oh, Tanya, Tatiana, there you go. But yeah, it's I once you've gone through enough things in life, like you kind of just realize like life is a series of hurdles on the path, and it's just one after the next. You're just going through things, you're going through things. What was the hurdle that I was facing the most at this time was, you know, constantly getting my ass kicked by a group of guys. Now, to be fair, the ringleader, the guy who would kind of stir up the other guys to kick my ass, he did apologize to me later on in high school. I was a sophomore in high school, and I ran into him one time, and he was like, "Hey, my bad. I'm sorry. We shouldn't have done that to you." And I was kind of over it. Or I was like, "Yeah, it's okay, dude. How are you doing? What's up?" And so I did forgive them, and I never really held a grudge against them. I just knew that that's what it was. That's how life is, and even to this day, I'm still convinced that that's just a part of growing up. Now, maybe not getting your ass beat and jumped necessarily, right? Like, I'm not saying that's normal, but in some form or another, like growing up, you have these things that shape you into who you are. And I'm just lucky enough that I took a lot of chances, I paid a lot of consequences, and it just so happened. I just wanted to tell this story because, again, it's like tied to video games, and I think it's funny that that's one of my fondest memories. Like, instead of spending the whole summer outside playing or hanging out with friends, I just kept running through playthroughs of Metal Gear Solid 3. Yeah, anyways, this is SideQuest 64, and I'll see you on the next one.